Hey everyone, I want to talk to you today about what shouldn't be a controversial topic, but sometimes can be, and that is the general purpose rifle. So this is the closest thing I have to what I would call a general purpose rifle. This is a build that I did during COVID. At its core, it's got a 13.9 barrel from Ballistic Advantage, and then Aero Precision parts mostly in here, BCM, MCMR handguard, a 1-6, lights, lasers, etc. And this is, if I had to grab one rifle to head out the door to deal with whatever the world might throw at me, is the rifle that I would grab to do that. It was also something that I built intentionally with that in mind. The big thing to keep in mind when you're talking about a build like this is, as with any build, there's going to be compromises. There is no free lunch. There is no one rifle that can do each and every aspect of any type of shooting well, or well, you can make it do it okay, but nothing is going to be perfectly suited for each and every scenario that you might run into. So it's always going to come down to what is the scenario or the environment that you find yourself in, and what compromises are you willing to make. So let me give you a little bit of the thought process behind this rifle when I built it, so that you can understand where I'm coming from, why I made the choices that I made in the construction of this rifle, what parts I chose and why, and then hopefully help you decide which parts might be more appropriate for you in a situation that you find yourself in. So first criteria that I had is I did not want it to be an SBR or an NFA item. So that meant that as a overall barrel length of at least 16 inches. So with this, again, it's a 13.9-inch barrel. I've got a pin and welded Yankee Hill flash hider on the front here to get it to just over, it's like 16.1 inches to the tip of where that flash hider is. Again, I didn't want to have something that I had to worry about crossing state lines with, or worrying what state I'm in. I wanted something that is just, I can drive into Idaho or I can drive into Washington, and I don't have to worry about notifying the ATF or anything crazy like that. So that was one criteria. But with that, I also wanted it to be as short as possible, just to make it a little bit easier to throw in the car or pack around. So again, hence that 13.9. Now I know 13.7 and 13.9 again can be somewhat controversial. I understand where a lot of people are coming from. However, to me, it's a good compromise between that barrel length for velocity while also keeping it as short as legally possible. If it wasn't for something like the NFA, I would not go with a 13.7 or 13.9. I would probably go with something more like that 12.5. But the reality that we live in today is that 16-inch barrel limit. And I also didn't want to have to worry about pistol braces, because some states are wishy-washy on that and go back and forth. So I just wanted something that's just a rifle, end of story, no extra stuff there. The other thing that I have to consider is the environment that I find myself in the Pacific Northwest. I can be in really thick forest where, you know, line of sight, you're probably not seeing more than, in many cases, 50, 60 yards, but really no more than 100 yards when you're going through the hills and whatnot. But then I can be out here in the valley where I can see, you know, more than a mile in any given direction, depending on where the tree lines are and everything else, and where the farm lines are. So I needed something that has a little bit of versatility and still gives me some capability at distance. That's where this Optic comes in. So this is a Primary Arms GLX 1-6. This one has the ACSS Raptor M6 reticle. And this is a first focal plane 1-6. This is the only first focal plane low power variable. Well, this was the first one that I liked. I also like their 1-8 PLX. But this was the first time I had used a low power variable that was first focal plane, where I actually found it quick and easy to use at 1 power. Without getting too deep in the weeds here, usually with a first focal plane variable power optic, that reticle's super tiny at 1 power, making it extremely difficult to use quickly. And then at 6 power, now you've got the full features of the reticle, or it's really big and easy to use at 1, but then it's just massive and unusable at 6 power. The way that this reticle is constructed, makes it still fast and easy to use at any magnification. And to kind of exemplify that point, I did use this in a two-gun match, a couple two-gun matches, and I was still able to go very quickly and effectively up close. And then we had a stage where we had to shoot out to about 200 yards, and this was still very easily capable of doing that. I have also taken this rifle out to my little long-range shooting spot out in kind of central Oregon, and I have reached out to about 600 meters with just 55 grain Frontier ammo. Due to the barrel length, you are going to be averaging just under 3,000 feet per second with 55 grain ammo. Again, depends on the ammo you're shooting. And with that, again, 600 meters is about the maximum distance where I can consistently get hits on a man-sized silhouette target that's also painted to contrast with the environment around it. Anything beyond that, I have made it hits out to 700 meters, but because it's well under, it's gone through transonic and is subsonic at that point, it's a lot more hit or miss, and it's also harder to even hear the impacts on the steel at a distance like that with a 55 grain 5.56. But again, I can still confidently reach out to about 600 yards or 650 yards or 600 meters with this rifle. Now, one thing you'll notice, I don't have any backup iron sights. That might be controversial. However, because I don't have a QD mount for the scope, even if I did need to switch to backup irons, I would still have to figure out a way to get this scope off, and that's not super usable. You might say, well, what about offset irons? That's great, except that I got my light and laser up here up front, which means that even if I had offset, I wouldn't actually be able to see them or use them. So really the alternative would be get a QD mount for the scope and then throw some regular iron sights on the front and back of this rifle. Now, one of the things that I did also with this rifle is I wanted to make it fully ambidextrous, at least within reason. So I have the Raptor the Raptor Talon safety, the short throw, so I can use that lefty or righty. I've got a tape switch to use the flashlight here as a righty with my left hand, and then it's also got the dual pressure cap so that I can also just toggle that with my thumb if I'm having to use my right hand. I've also got the CMMG magazine release, so I can hit the magazine release with my left hand if I absolutely had to. Obviously, ambi-charging handle. So this thing is perfectly usable, both right-handed and left-handed. That was something that I wanted. And then even just the actuation of my Purse 3 up top, I can do that right-handed or left-handed because I'm just running it off the button on the top or the back, whichever one tickles your fancy. So again, that was something that was important to me that I wanted to have. And then because I wanted it to operate 24 hours a day, that's why we've got the white light. This is a Surefire, I think this is the 640 Pro Scout light. So that's the 1500 lumen, whatever candela, I don't actually know. I don't typically remember too much of the specific numbers on that. And then again, the Purse 3 IR laser illuminator up top, so that with night vision, I can still function. This has an incredible illuminator on there, so I can still light things up pretty far away. The only drawback, and again, getting into the compromises, is I don't have a way of passive aiming with this. I've got to use an active laser if I'm going to be shooting this thing with night vision, because I cannot passively aim through this low power variable. Now, because I care a little bit about ergonomics, we've already talked about that Talon safety, but then I've also got the MOE Plus pistol grip. I really like that tacky texture to the pistol grip. I've got the Rise Armament RA535 trigger in there, which has been exceptional for me. It's been extremely reliable and very, very well-performing trigger. And then I've got one of the B5 stocks back here, which I'm a big fan of, and does allow me for the tool compartment back here in the back. If I really, really did have to take this scope mount off, I could with that tool back there. And then inside, I've got the Viltor A5 buffer kit, again, just because I wanted this thing to be as smooth shooting and refined shooting as possible. I think I might have already mentioned it's a BA Hansen barrel inside. The Hansen barrels are my favorite barrels to use for ground up builds because I really like that pinned on gas block. I never have to worry about that gas block coming loose ever and shutting this rifle down. Again, this is a rifle where I want to be able to grab it and go, have everything I need on it, including things to maintain it, because I don't want to have to do maintenance in the field. And if that gas block is pinned on, it's just one fewer thing to go wrong, and especially one thing that if it does go wrong, completely shuts the rifle down. Now, to that point, I used to also have inside the pistol grip an extra bolt, firing pin, and firing pin retaining pin. The Magpul insert for that, though, broke, so I need to get that warrantied through Magpul or just get a replacement one for what that's worth. Because again, I want to have any spare parts that I might need just on the rifle at all times. As far as the sling, you know, is a little bit more of a kind of do whatever you want kind of thing, whatever tickles your fancy. This is one of the Slingster slings from Faro Concepts. Works very, very well. And again, it's one of those things where if you don't notice it, that's a good thing because it's just doing its job. When you do notice your sling, that's probably a bad thing because it's probably getting in the way. So again, because the way I have this thing set up, if I wanted to, I do have one of the White Gem thread protectors on the muzzle device just because this is pinned and welded. I want to make sure I don't accidentally damage that and then have to pay money to replace it to get it unpinned and repinned. So I just keep that on there when I'm not shooting suppressed, and then when I want to shoot suppressed, I just throw the silencer on there. It is also worth noting, I did specifically choose the flash hider because I personally prefer flash hiders. Anything I can do to reduce my signature, the better. And 5.56 recoil is really not that bad, especially when you have a Viltory 5 system. So I don't need it to get that shot-to-shot recovery. I can still run this thing very, very quick. The one thing I haven't talked about, this BCM vertical grip, I have it set up here up front, really just as a index point so I can get onto my light and onto my laser if I had to. Again, whether I'm running it right-handed or left-handed, it just gives me that same spot to return to every single time, just to make things a little bit more consistent and a little bit more user-friendly. So again, I want to be able to handle anything from 0 to 600 yards. I want to be able to handle it daytime or nighttime. And if I am shooting out a little bit further, I want to be able to positively ID targets and be as precise as I possibly can. And this rifle allows me to do that reliably, consistently, without fear of subpar parts contributing to poor performance in the long run. Again, I put this thing back, together kind of in the early stages of COVID. Took me a while because parts availability was extremely limited back at that point in time. So, you know, I probably finished this thing around 2021. It's also probably the single most expensive rifle when you consider the value of the parts that were put into it. The only things that I didn't pay for were the trigger and the scope. These both came from other builds that I had done and were free to me because they were provided for review at those various points in time. Everything else though is paid for with my own money, and again, it's definitely not a cheap rifle, especially when we're talking the IR laser illuminator. We're talking, you know, a few $1,000s, but again, it's something that I know I can trust my life to and will handle most situations I can find myself running across fairly well. If I was living in the inner city, maybe I would go with something a little bit shorter. If I was living in the plains of Nebraska, I would maybe go with something a little bit longer. But again, for the situation I find myself in the Pacific Northwest, this was the best combination of compromises that I could come up with and has served me really, really well. And just by way of comparison, I do have my Midwest Industries Night Fighter rifle here. So this is something that was set up specifically for night vision use. I wanted to excel at night vision use, so hence the use of a red dot here, specifically the Holosun Aims. It is really great for passive night vision aiming. The 16-inch barrel, even without a silencer, helps reduce my muzzle flash and signature at night to help reduce any sort of target indicators that I can. And again, it's just set up specifically with that in mind. Enlarged controls, the ability to lock the bolt open without having to use change my grip. Again, it's just set up for that and does very well. This is set up for a little bit of everything. And again, in my experience and using it so far, it is set up really well. Now, the most important thing when it comes to setting up a rifle like this is you might be able to sit on Reddit, read threads and forums and all this stuff about why this configuration is great for that or this rifle part is great for that. You really, though, have to get out there and proof test your equipment. It's not good enough to say, oh, some random guy with that I've never met told me that this flashlight is great for everything in this context, okay, cool. That might be a good place to start, but you really got to go out there and test it. Again, I've run this thing through classes, I've run it through matches, I've shot it out to 700 meters, and I've shot it a whole lot closer than that. So it's really, really important to kind of swallow your pride, be willing to test out your equipment, maybe realize that the way you had it set up wasn't the best in one way or another, and then assess that and push on from there. But again, through the testing I've done, I'm super, super happy with the way this thing turned out. Again, it's to me, my general purpose rifle. But it's not going to be everyone's general purpose rifle. Again, like I said, your environment's going to say a lot about that, and your personal ergonomics, your preferences, etc., will also come into play there. If you guys have any similarities in your general purpose rifle setup, please let me know. If you guys have recommendations or thoughts, concerns, anything else like that, please let me know that as well. Again, it's just something I wanted to get this in front of the camera finally officially, because it's been in the family for a long time, and I haven't done a dedicated video on it, and I figured now is a good time. So I do want to say thanks to my patrons to help make videos like this one possible. We post all our content over there early. We do some exclusive content. We do monthly live streams. If any of that stuff sounds interesting, or you just want to financially support the channel, follow the links down in the description below. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.